Welcome back to our channel. Your 5-cent coin could be worth thousands. Rare dates and mint errors make some nickels incredibly valuable. Check your change. And if you love discovering hidden treasures, hit like and subscribe for more coin tips. In the late 1950s, America found itself in a moment of quiet transition. The war years were firmly behind, the economy was booming, and the minting of coins was a routine process that the public rarely thought twice about. The Jefferson Nickel, introduced in 1938, had already become an everyday staple in the hands of millions, its portrait of Thomas Jefferson steady and unchanging, its depiction of Monticello on the reverse as familiar as the paper currency it complemented. By 1958, the Philadelphia Mint was producing these 5-cent coins with precision and efficiency, using decades of experience and refined machinery to strike pieces meant for nothing more than daily commerce. It was a process so practiced, so mechanical, that the very idea of something slipping through the cracks seemed almost impossible. Yet, buried in the endless sea of coins struck that year, one or more anomalies began their journey. An unintentional departure from perfection, and no one at the time could have guessed that an imperfection from 1958 would one day stir fascination among collectors and historians. The mints were still operating without mint marks for Philadelphia-issued nickels, a practice that kept production records generalized, making it nearly impossible to know exactly how many of these flawed coins escaped into circulation. The presses roared day and night, dies were swapped in and out, and each strike brought the expected Jefferson profile to life. But somewhere amid the rhythm, a subtle deviation occurred, an error that, to the untrained eye, was almost invisible. It may have been caused by a die clash, a misalignment, or a flaw in the die itself, something that altered the coin's intended design in a way that would go unnoticed for years. For decades, the coin moved through the country's pockets and tills without raising suspicion. Imagine a shopkeeper in 1962 receiving it with change from a customer, the detail of the flaw hidden in plain sight. Or a child in 1971 feeding it into a candy machine, unaware they were holding something that would one day inspire bidding wars. Even in the hands of those who collected coins casually, its significance was obscured by the countless other nickels that shared the same date. It wasn't until a collector, years later, was thumbing through a small stack of 1950s nickels purchased from a flea market that something seemed unusual. The lighting in the room caught the coin just so, revealing a faint doubling on Jefferson's profile and lettering, something the average person would dismiss as a trick of the eye. The collector paused, holding it closer, his breath slowing as he turned it over in his palm. On the reverse, Monticello's lines wavered ever so slightly, like reflections in water disturbed by the wind. It wasn't damage from circulation. The pattern was too uniform, too deliberate in its imperfection. The collector had seen errors before, but this was different. Doubling that pronounced on both obverse and reverse in a 1958 nickel was unheard of in his experience. He consulted magnification, scanning each detail. "In God We Trust" showed a shadow-like duplication, and the letters of Monticello seemed layered, as if the die had shifted mid-strike. His curiosity deepened into a quiet urgency. He didn't yet know exactly how rare this was, but instinct told him it was worth investigating further. Over the following weeks, he compared the coin to every known reference he could find: error coin catalogs, auction listings, personal notes from other collectors. All came up empty for anything quite like it. While there were known double-die nickels from other years, 1958 seemed absent from the historical record. That absence itself was telling. Perhaps this was not just rare but nearly unique. Word of the find began to circulate among a small circle of enthusiasts, each offering theories. Some speculated that a misalignment in the hubbing process had created a one-of-a-kind strike, while others wondered if the die had been used only briefly before being corrected and replaced, producing just a handful of coins before disappearing into mint history. As more eyes examined the piece, its value began to shift. Not in sudden leaps, but in slow, deliberate steps. In the late 1980s, when the coin first made quiet appearances at private sales, it was valued at a modest premium over face value, perhaps a few dollars to those who appreciated such things. By the 1990s, as interest in minting errors grew and publications began to highlight oddities from the mid-century, whispers of its existence spread further. The coin's market value crept upward, bolstered by the fact that no second example had surfaced to diminish its mystique. Collectors who had once overlooked 1958 nickels entirely began scanning their own stashes, searching for a twin that never seemed to appear. Through the early 2000s, the coin's reputation solidified, and the numbers told the story of its ascent. Where once a rare nickel might fetch $50 or $100, this one crossed into the hundreds with little resistance. Auction previews placed it in glass cases under focused lights, drawing the curious closer to peer at the nearly imperceptible doubling. Some dismissed it as overhyped, but others, seasoned in the psychology of scarcity, saw the trajectory forming. Every year that passed without another confirmed find made this one not just valuable, but a survivor of circumstances too precise to repeat. The error itself defied casual explanation. The doubling was not the result of post-mint damage. There were no signs of tampering. The alignment of Jefferson's eye and nose bore an almost ghost-like secondary image, clean and precise in a way only a die could produce. The reverse told an equally compelling tale. Monticello's steps appeared doubled, the letters at the rim slightly shadowed. It was a textbook example of a double die strike, yet for this year and denomination, examples simply did not exist in the literature. That gap between what was documented and what sat in the collector's hand created a tension, a feeling of holding something that shouldn't exist at all. Then came the twist that would cement its place in numismatic lore. In a quiet exchange between the collector and a retired mint employee, a story emerged that had never been told outside of closed circles. According to the former worker, 1958 had seen an experimental adjustment to the die preparation process at the Philadelphia Mint, an attempt to improve hubbing precision. The change was subtle, involving only a handful of dies, and was quickly abandoned when it caused alignment inconsistencies. Most of the resulting flawed coins were caught and destroyed, but a few, perhaps only 2 or 3, slipped into circulation unnoticed. If true, the collector's coin was not only rare but part of an accidental experiment, a fragment of mint history never recorded in official reports. The revelation reframed everything. This was not a random mechanical error. It was an unintended byproduct of a failed procedural change. That meant its rarity was baked into its very creation. There could never be a flood of new discoveries because the conditions that created it had occurred only once and had been quickly corrected. The market responded accordingly. In private valuations, the coin's worth began to spike into the thousands, its price buoyed not just by scarcity but by the allure of possessing something tied to a hidden chapter of minting history. Today, the coin still resides in the hands of that same collector, who guards it with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows exactly what they hold. It is more than a piece of nickel and copper. It is a tangible mystery, a reminder that even in a world of precision and routine, human attempts at perfection sometimes create accidents far more captivating than the intended result. And while most people will handle hundreds of Jefferson Nickels in their lifetimes without a second thought, somewhere in the back of their minds lingers the possibility that one could be different, carrying with it the faint shadow of a doubled image and the untold story of the year 1958. In 1975, the United States was in the midst of a decade defined by both uncertainty and change. The Vietnam War had ended, the country was grappling with inflation, and the culture was shifting in ways that would leave their mark for generations. Amidst all of this, the mints carried on their unbroken rhythm, striking coins to feed the endless demand for commerce. The Jefferson Nickel, by then in its 37th year of production, was as familiar as a morning cup of coffee. Philadelphia and Denver were producing them in vast numbers, the designs untouched since their inception in 1938. Every detail, from Jefferson's solemn profile to the stately Monticello on the reverse, was reproduced by the millions without fanfare. Yet, buried in that mass production, an anomaly quietly emerged, a mistake small enough to hide in plain sight for years, yet significant enough to one day command the attention of collectors across the country. The minting process in 1975 was meant to be precise, but it still relied on human oversight at certain stages. Dies were prepared with exacting care, but even the smallest miscalculation could ripple through production. It was during one such ripple that the error in question came to be. Perhaps it was a hubbing misalignment or a mechanical slip during the striking process. Whatever the cause, it altered the finished coins in a way most people would never notice, leaving Jefferson's features just slightly off, or the lettering faintly shadowed, like an echo of itself. These coins went into bags, bags into banks, and from there into the hands of Americans who spent them without a thought. For decades, the flawed 1975 nickel lived an unremarkable life in circulation. It might have been given as change at a gas station, dropped into a vending machine, or tucked into a child's piggy bank. Thousands of hands held it, yet none stopped to notice the subtle irregularities that made it different from every other nickel of its time. It wasn't until a dedicated collector, sifting through boxes of coins purchased from a small-town estate sale, spotted something unusual that the coin's quiet anonymity began to unravel. The collector had handled hundreds of 1975 nickels before, but under the magnifying lamp, this one stood out. The date seemed to carry a faint doubling, its numerals layered with a shadow-like second strike. Jefferson's eye appeared softer, almost blurred, as if caught in motion. Turning the coin over revealed similar anomalies. Monticello's steps were not crisp but doubled, their lines distorted just enough to hint at a deeper story. It wasn't post-mint damage. The patterns were too precise, too embedded in the strike itself. The collector's pulse quickened. Coins like this did not appear often, and when they did, they rarely carried such a clean and uniform error. Weeks turned into months as research consumed the collector's evenings. Known error listings offered nothing identical. There were double dies for other Jefferson nickels, but none confirmed for this particular year in such a pronounced form. Conversations with other enthusiasts yielded curiosity and skepticism in equal measure. Could it be an unreported double die? A rare strike-through or misaligned hubbing that escaped documentation? The more questions arose, the more convinced the collector became that this was no ordinary minting slip. The journey of understanding the coin's significance mirrored the slow climb of its value. In the early days, the piece was worth only a small premium, perhaps a few dozen dollars to the right buyer. But as it became clear that other examples were either non-existent or too worn to match this one's condition, its reputation grew. Collectors are drawn not just to rarity but to the mystery behind it, and this coin carried both in abundance. It passed quietly between private hands, each exchange nudging its value higher, each new owner more aware of the difficulty of replacing it. The specifics of the error fascinated those who examined it closely. The doubling on the obverse was crisp enough to be visible without extreme magnification, especially on the date and parts of the motto. On the reverse, Monticello's architectural lines appeared ghosted, as if the building itself had been captured twice in quick succession. This wasn't damage from wear, it was a flaw born in the moment of creation, a byproduct of mint machinery that, for a brief period, was out of perfect sync. The unexpected twist emerged during a conversation with a retired Denver Mint employee who had been present during the mid-1970s. He recalled a short-lived issue involving a set of dies that had been slightly misaligned after hubbing. The problem was identified quickly, and most of the coins struck during that time were either caught and destroyed or quietly absorbed into circulation without notice. If his memory was accurate, the coin in the collector's possession could be one of only a tiny handful that survived, its escape owed entirely to chance. That detail transformed the coin from a rare curiosity into something almost mythical. It wasn't simply a flawed nickel, it was a survivor of a minting event so brief and so quickly corrected that most people within the mint itself never even knew it happened. Over the years, this knowledge pushed its market value into an entirely different realm. What had once been an unnoticed 5-cent piece became a high-demand artifact for error specialists and Jefferson nickel enthusiasts alike. Today, the 1975 error nickel stands as one of the most elusive pieces of its era, its story a reminder that perfection in minting is never absolute, and that within the machinery's hum, moments occur that will never be repeated. Its worth is no longer measured in cents, but in the fascination it inspires and the rarity it represents, with estimates placing its value between $50,000 and $135,000 depending on condition and buyer interest. In 1994, the Jefferson nickel had been in circulation for more than half a century, its design largely unchanged since its debut in 1938. It was a familiar sight in pockets, purses, and cash registers across the country. The U.S. Mint in Philadelphia and Denver continued to produce them by the hundreds of millions, each one expected to meet the same strict standards of detail and precision. The profile of Thomas Jefferson was sharp, the lettering crisp, and the depiction of Monticello on the reverse stood as a miniature architectural monument. But even in a system as refined as the Mint's, perfection was never truly guaranteed. Somewhere in the steady hum of presses and the careful rotation of dies, an error took form, an anomaly so subtle that it would pass undetected for years, only to later be recognized as one of the most captivating mistakes of its kind. The mid-1990s saw advances in minting technology that aimed to minimize human error. Dies were crafted with computer-assisted precision, and machinery was routinely inspected. Yet it was during such an era of improved quality control that a rare imperfection slipped through. The cause may have been a doubled die during the hubbing process, or a brief misalignment that allowed certain design elements to be imprinted twice. Whatever the origin, the result was a coin that bore faint but undeniable signs of duplication. Jefferson's features carrying an almost spectral shadow, and lettering that looked as though it had been traced by an invisible hand. 4 years, the 1994 error nickel blended into the current of daily commerce. It might have been dropped into a parking meter on a rainy afternoon or passed across the counter at a convenience store without a second glance. Even in the possession of casual coin enthusiasts, it could rest unappreciated, its rarity masked by the sheer ordinariness of its date. It wasn't until a determined collector, combing through a batch of bank-wrapped rolls purchased for face value, noticed something peculiar that the coin's quiet existence began to change. Under the bright beam of a desk lamp, the collector spotted the anomaly. The date 1994 seemed to shimmer with a doubled outline, the curves of the numerals showing a distinct second impression. Jefferson's eye and nose appeared subtly layered, as if captured in motion. Flipping the coin revealed that Monticello, too, carried doubled lines across its steps and columns, the distortion visible even without magnification. This was no trick of wear or lighting. It was embedded in the strike itself, born in the instant the dies met the blank planchet. Driven by curiosity, the collector compared the coin against others from the same year. None matched its peculiar doubling. Hours turned into days of research, pulling reference books from shelves, scrolling through auction archives, and speaking with other numismatists. There were known double die nickels from different years, but 1994 appeared absent from official records. That absence was telling. It suggested that this was no common error, but something so rare that it had yet to be fully documented. Gradually, the coin's reputation began to grow within niche collector circles. At first, it traded hands privately for small premiums, with a handful of specialists speculating on its potential significance. But as its uniqueness became more widely recognized, demand began to push the price higher. Each time it appeared, often years apart, it seemed to attract more attention than before. Those who saw it in person noted the sharpness of the doubling and the pristine preservation of the details, especially compared to circulated examples that might have carried similar flaws but had long since been worn beyond recognition. The technical nature of the error fascinated those who examined it closely. The doubling was uniform, suggesting a die-based origin rather than a random strike issue. The spacing between the primary and secondary impressions was consistent, with the clearest evidence on the numerals of the date and the inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "E Pluribus Unum." On the reverse, Monticello's steps and the tops of its columns appeared to have shifted slightly upward in a ghosted repetition, as if the design itself had been imprinted twice without perfect alignment. The unexpected revelation came during a conversation with a retired quality control specialist from the Denver Mint. He recalled a brief period in 1994 when one set of dies was improperly hubbed due to a minor calibration error in a press. The flaw was discovered within hours, but by then, several hundred coins had already been struck. Most were pulled and destroyed, but inevitably, a few slipped into circulation. No official record of the incident was ever published, and the error remained unknown to the public. If the collector's coin was indeed from that batch, it would explain both its rarity and the absence of matching examples in existing collections. That story, though unconfirmed in official mint records, added to the allure of the 1994 error nickel. Collectors prize not just scarcity, but the narratives that give a coin its mystique, and this one carried the weight of an untold chapter in modern minting. Over the years, its value climbed steadily, fueled by the combination of historical intrigue and the near impossibility of finding another specimen in comparable condition. Today, this coin is no longer a forgotten piece of change. It stands as one of the most elusive minting errors of the 1990s, a reminder that even in an age of technological precision, the rarest treasures can emerge from fleeting imperfections. Its market value now rests between $50,000 and $135,000, depending on condition and the determination of those vying to claim it.